Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Diane Hayden, and you are listening to The Dr. Diane Show. Stay with us for the next half hour where we will explore revolutionary expansion of mind, body, and soul. Each time on The Dr. Diane Show, we have experts from around the country discussing cutting edge topics on longevity medicine, natural health, mindset, and soul purpose to help you shift your perspective and become a mindset warrior like me. I'm happy to be joined today by Mischa Hadaway, who is the owner of Gentle Mama Counseling, LLC, located in West Hartford, Connecticut. She is a perinatal therapist working with new moms and moms-to-be to improve the feelings associated with the experience of motherhood, working together with clients to process the sad, scary, or negative memories or feelings of their birth story in a way that empowers, nurtures, and supports them. In addition to being a therapist, she is also a birth doula and owner of Me and My Doula, which services Hartford and New Haven counties. As a doula, she aids in helping families through the amazing experience of pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum. She's a licensed clinical social worker with a specialty in perinatal therapy, and she holds a certification in perinatal maternal health obtained through the Postpartum Support International. Mischa is a certified birth doula through DONA International, a Reiki master, and is working toward obtaining a certificate as a lactation consultant educator. Mischa spends her free time at Connecticut Children's Medical Center with the Child Life Department as a child life volunteer, and you can learn more about her at www.gentlemamacounseling.com. So welcome, Mischa. How are you today?
Good. Thank you so much. It's so weird sometimes listening to someone read stuff about you.
Yeah, you're like, is that me? Yeah, you're quite accomplished. I mean, it's amazing, like all of the things that, you have done as far as certifications and education and all that to do what you do. So I guess I want to start there. Like, what kind of led you down this journey to, becoming involved in perinatal mental health?
That's an awesome question. And if you ask my sister, she would say it was all up to her. But for me, when I was growing up, I always wanted to be, and I used to call it a baby doctor. I was like, when everyone would ask me, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? A baby doctor. And initially, I thought pediatrician. And then I thought OBGYN. And then when I started school as a bio pre-med major, I was kind of like, this is not what I want to do.
Right.
Like, science wasn't very fun.
Yeah.
Um, and I ended up kind of going through like this, like take all the intro to blank classes, and ended up falling in love with social work. I actually, my very first intro to social work professor was amazing. And she helped me kind of like figure out my niche and kind of go that route. And I never looked back. I started studying all that I could about social work, and ended up, which is why my sister says it's because of her, I ended up in the delivery room with her after her first baby. And
Ah.
I was again like just enamored by the process. Like I wanted to know all the things, like what does this mean? And from there, one of the nurses was like, why aren't you a doula? And I had never heard the term before. So
Right.
it went from like social work to doula. I did some direct child care work as far as like a clinical social worker for children. And I was noticing that all the work that I did with children involved families, and all the work with families typically involved mom. And that kind of led me to perinatal work through a couple of different connections that helped me to realize like mom is the really important part of the family. She's kind of the stakeholder. She's, chauffeur, cook, life carrier. Like she sometimes is working full time, sometimes staying at home and managing all the other things. And so it kind of like this wayward backwards connection to like still being able to be in the OR. I'm just not the surgeon holding the scalpel,
Yeah.
and then being able to kind of impact families by working with moms.
Well, you probably dodged a bullet because every OBGYN that I talk to wants to get out. And it's like a nightmare of like insurance and costs and everything like that. So it sounds like you made the right choice as far as the path that you're going down. And obviously you had a calling from a young age, so you're still working with babies.
I still am.
So I love that we're talking about perinatal mental health because I feel like it's one of those things that still is kind of like I don't know if the word is overlooked or like swept under the carpet. Like no one really talks about it. And, a mom pregnancy and that whole thing is supposed to be like the best time of their lives and, all that. And honestly, like you hear a lot of stories that are sad, like where women are really struggling
Yeah.
with, the feelings and emotions and all that. So Like, just tell us a little bit about what is that, and how did you get involved with that specifically?
Yeah, so you bring up a really good point in regards to like the sometimes it's stigma around mental health, sometimes it's stigma around the fear that like if I talk about, especially as a parent and specifically motherhood, like if I talk about anything negatively, then I'm going to be judged for it. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, like the statistics show that about 20% of women are not asked about depression symptoms at all. And 1 in 8 of them during their prenatal visit aren't asked about depression either. And so if I had a mood disorder and I'm struggling before I got pregnant or struggling during pregnancy, no one's asking me like how I'm feeling, what's going on, and kind of like helping me to discover that there is something out there to help me with it. Right.
Right.
So, in regards to perinatal work itself, like the World Health Organization defines just maternal health as kind of health of a woman during pregnancy, birth, and the postnatal period. Specifically, perinatal mental health kind of looks around, it's the perinatal is the all around the birth experience. So from preconception to if you're carrying a child and you're pregnant to the postpartum period, which is usually about a year after you've had the baby. However, you're postpartum forever. Like it
Right.
doesn't end.
Technically. Yeah.
Technically. So it's like that early postpartum period. Um, and its focus is to kind of address different kinds of feelings that come up again during that prenatal period or postpartum period. So it's looking at when people have feelings of anger or irritability and sadness, or anxious thoughts and you're feeling panicky. Maybe you have a loss or decreased interest in motherhood or baby care or in your actual baby, or feeling like less energetic. You can have changes in your sleeping habits. So not just like the newborn sleep issue that a lot of us face, that like you're sleeping when baby sleeps, like quote unquote. But also like if you're having insomnia and you really cannot go to sleep, even at times when you know you're extraordinarily tired, those could be symptoms that like there's something more going on. Like a lot of us experience brain fog, but if it intensifies, excuse me, and it feels like you're having even more trouble concentrating, that could be another symptom. Or if you're feeling hopeless or you have excessive worries, like I think pregnancy should be correspondent as a synonym with anxiety, because I don't know many pregnant women that are not also anxious. Like, but when it becomes like an overwhelming feeling of anxiety and hopelessness or worries, like, or fear, and it like is almost debilitating, so you can't do anything, that's when it kind of edges into more of that perinatal mood related space. And when you need support from a perinatal therapist to kind of address it. So perinatal mental health is all around kind of addressing moods that feel a little bit off, like they're not quite like I'm feeling my normal self.
Mhm.
And if I have any reason to pause, so if I'm just initially kind of concerned about it, you can always reach out and get an assessment just to see, like, or talk to your provider, because again, they're not always asking, like, in addition to how you're feeling, like, how are you thinking? Right? Like, what else could be going on in your kind of mental space? Like, and how is it impacting your bodily functions? Like, right? Sometimes heart palpitations, right? If I'm really anxious and my heart is like beating out of my chest, like, how does that translate to my parenting? Like, is there anything like, right? If I'm nervous, for example, of somebody else holding my baby, like, and the fear that they're going to drop the baby kind of intensifies it. I don't even let anyone else touch my baby. Like, some of that is normal because that's normal to be worried about your child and something happening to them. But then the difficulty of separating with that child could mean something else is going on.
Right. Yeah. So you mentioned for like people who have mood disorders before they come pregnant. I mean, obviously that would be, I think that would make more sense as to why people would need more support. But it's also for women that didn't have a mood disorder.
Mm-hmm.
In which case I think it might be harder to diagnose or pick up on, or even the woman herself might not necessarily even be aware of why she's feeling certain feelings, and maybe judging herself for that, where it doesn't, you don't have to have had a mood disorder to have these things happen while you're pregnant and after.
Correct. Yep, 100% true. There's no predetermining factor sometimes for the having a perinatal mood disorder. It just kind of happens sometimes. Sometimes it's because of the hormone imbalance that occurs postpartum. Sometimes it's because my journey to just become pregnant was challenging. A lot of us think stop birth control, you get pregnant.
Yeah.
And that's not always the case,
Right.
right? Like, and so if I struggled with that, I could start to then have a lot of feelings that I didn't have before, feelings about my body itself and like whether or not I feel like it's failing or it's not good enough or something's wrong with me. And then sometimes they develop because I have a harder time, right? If I start taking like drugs, for example, for IVF, right? So I'm taking different medications. And so I'm having hormone imbalances because I need to take different kinds of progesterone or estrogen. That could create further imbalances when I then stop taking them.
Mm.
Like, and so my body adjusts to having them in my system. And then once I'm pregnant, things have to kind of balance back out. And then that could sometimes lead to something. So you could be completely, and I put in quotes, normal, like, and then going through this process, have something abnormal happen, and then it creates a mood disorder.
Right. Yeah. So are there any risk factors?
To a perinatal mood disorder?
Yeah, like you know, I guess the question is, you know, how would someone know that that's what they're dealing with? And then
Mhm.
also, are there other risk factors related to just the general health of the mom and the baby?
Yeah. So the one that you had just said is one of them. So, right, the history of having a a mental health diagnosis for
Hmm.
yourself or someone in your family, right? That like nature nurture compound, like it doesn't always have to be you, but if there's a history of anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, or psychosis, even sometimes OCD, like could create the perfect kind of storm for a perinatal mood disorder. Other things like PMDD, so premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So if I have issues around my menstrual cycle, can sometimes lead to perinatal mood disorder. Or other things like thyroid issues or diabetes. And it could be an under or overactive thyroid that can lead to a perinatal mood disorder, trauma, abuse of any kind. That could be pre-pregnancy, so it could be like physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse before pregnancy, during or after. In addition to birth trauma, right? Like it could happen in the labor and delivery department where you experience something traumatic, and that could lead to a perinatal mood disorder. The last one, and it happens to be October, so it kind of coincides. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but also it's Infant Loss Awareness Month. And so a perinatal mood disorder could develop from a pregnant person that experiences a loss. So it could be from stillborn to a miscarriage to an infant death can lead to a mood disorder.
Oh my gosh, of course. I mean, to me, that's like, well, how would that not? I mean, all of those things, honestly, like,
Mhm, mhm.
are extremely traumatic. And I
They
think also,
are.
like, we don't talk often about the whole energy around all of this, right? Like energy around the mom and the baby in utero and that kind of thing. Like when the mom is having a lot of anxiety or it could be depression, like how is that energetically affecting the fetus?
Yeah, for sure. Life stressors is another risk factor. And sometimes we don't think about them because, like, if I'm having relationship issues, or if fertility and loss, which you talked about, like infertility related stuff, maybe I'm a single mom, right? So that creates a whole nother area of life stressors, or a teen mom, right? Like, I think those are also things too that we don't always directly consider as like maybe I could develop a mood disorder from, but could totally be connected because there's things that we expected or we thought should happen. And then it doesn't go that way. And then sometimes we have some adverse side effects to it.
Right. Yep. Yep. It was interesting. This story is like a little bit out there, but like I
Yeah.
just got this download to tell it. But I was working with and I forget what this woman did, but she was an energy healer of some sort. And what she does is she like goes back in time with you
Mhm,
all the way to when you were in utero. And she would pick up particular times where there was some sort of trauma in your
mhm,
life. Like
mhm,
let's say, I don't know, you had to have some sort of surgery as a young child or or something as simple as like you were bullied on, not that that's simple, but I'm saying like not like a major health event, but say like you had some confrontation with kids at school when you were in grade school or something. Like she'll pick these certain years and say like, okay, age whatever, do you remember some type of trauma? And then she would work through processing it for you. Well, one of the things that came up for me was a specific time when I was in utero, when my mom was pregnant with me, and I didn't know. I'm like, well, I don't know. And when I went to ask my mother, she's like, oh yeah, like I was 7 months pregnant when your dad had a really bad car accident. And this woman, energy healer, picked that up, which I found fascinating. Like, and that trauma was in my body, even though I hadn't even been born yet.
For 100%. There's an image of like a mom with like a pregnant belly, or a woman, I'm assuming, with a pregnant belly, right? And then a fetus inside of a fetus inside of a fetus inside of a fetus, because like very similar to that experience, right? That like we're exposing babies to all kinds of things, not just what we eat, but the kind of energy that surrounds our livelihoods, right? And so when something happens to mom, those emotions, like a lot of people, for like a hot second, I'm going to switch gears, because like some women who've experienced miscarriages, like while there isn't a direct correlation that a doctor could say like stress did this, they
Mhm.
come to me with that feeling of like, I was so stressed out right before I had that miscarriage. Could that be why?
Right.
Right. So like there is some kind of connection, cosmic energy related, like that might create, unfortunately, situations where it feels like there's that connection to a loss or to a trauma or to a memory, like that, if you're pre-verbal, you can't necessarily add words to describe, like, but that something happens and like there's a mark or a stain or an impression, like for generations sometimes, right?
Right.
Like
Yep.
a parent who was pregnant during the Great Depression, and what that then looks like for their child now in the 21st century.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. So when someone comes to see you, kind of like walk me through the process. What do they experience?
Um, well, that's a really good question. I feel like, well, because 1 in 5 moms unfortunately experience a perinatal mood disorder, and 1 in 10 dads do. So I sometimes see either or of the people in the partnership. I don't do couples, so I don't see them together, but I do kind of work with them separately. So depending on how they're coming to me, be it a referral, be it they found me on the internet, or follow me on social media, like they're able to identify, like right through the gate, this is something I'm working towards. So it could be they feel like they're a bad mom, or they feel like they're losing connection with their partner, or they're absolutely terrified of giving birth. Like the kind of gamut of any of those symptoms kind of bring them through the door to me. And right from the get-go, I let people know, like, I try to be as transparent as possible. So like I'm gonna bring you my perfect self, like perfectly imperfect self. Like, so
Yep.
I'm expecting the same thing from you. So I always have, and I have one here today too. I always have like a cup of something, tea, my water bottle, sometimes snacks. So I encourage the people I'm seeing, especially moms, because how often do you get to finish a hot cup of coffee? Like, you have an hour with me, drink your cup of coffee while we're talking,
Oh,
right?
that's
You can
awesome. I love
expect
it.
you can expect like a cup of something, usually some kind of, and I'm sorry, they just started weed whacking outside my window. Can you hear that?
It's so far off in the distance.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So you can get a cup of something hot, some kind of snack, and then we're going to talk through different things, right? I love to use humor. I also tell people sometimes like it's okay to swear, because motherhood, there isn't always an answer or like a word that fits it, and so you sometimes have to say, oh my, like,
Right.
and insert whatever word feels good.
Whatever expletive. Yeah,
Exactly,
just get that
exactly,
frustration out.
right out, like, and then we can process, like, okay, tell me the feeling behind that, right?
Yeah.
Like, but you don't have to come like all well and put together. Like today I'm put together because I'm doing this podcast, but usually my hair is up in a bun and I'm wearing a t-shirt and I have my cup of tea, and we kind of move through everything that way, because I think it's important to just kind of be authentic. And so if you're having a hard day, or you're struggling with breastfeeding, or you're extraordinarily overwhelmed, like you can turn your camera off, right? I don't, like, if you feel like you're a mess, like physically and mentally, I don't have to see the physical side. Just give me the mental piece and we'll work through it. Like, but I need a client to be open-minded. I need a client to be willing to kind of talk to me. A client who is, again, comfortable with vulnerability, because I think in therapy, that's a really important piece. And you need to feel connected to me. Like I want the clients that I work with to feel like they're having a conversation with a girlfriend. But there's an added bonus where like I sometimes offer homework, or I will give like different nuggets, or we will kind of process through something. And a lot of my clients will joke around and say, I need a t-shirt that says WWMD, like what would Mischa do? Because they sometimes hear me in their heads as they're like, okay, Mischa said I should say this, take a deep breath, like all the things. So they expect a little humor, a little swearing, maybe a hot cup of something, and a
That's
good time.
awesome. Yeah, I mean, you could tell, I mean, your passion definitely comes through. And you, like, as I'm just talking with you, it's very easy and flowy and comfortable. And I get how, your clients would feel that way too. One thing I wanted to point out, so you said like they can turn their camera off. So do you see most of your clients virtually, or do you
Mostly
do in,
virtually.
okay,
Yes.
okay.
Before COVID, it was all in person.
Yeah.
And then with COVID kind of unfortunately happening, people were becoming very isolated, and I needed a way to kind of contact them. And with my moms who have newborns or they're going through fertility, they were very, very scared about exposure and getting sick. And so we kind of had to pivot to accommodate, one, to decrease that anxiety, but to allow access. And so we pivoted to virtual.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, how do moms access help if they feel like they might be at risk, or maybe, they're not sure, but they think they might have a perinatal mood disorder? Like, what are the steps they should take?
So I definitely encourage clients to always talk to your provider, right? Like there's always, be it a midwife or an OB, your primary care doctor, even sometimes just a friend, like, or your spouse, like a partner, like talk to someone and let them know that, like, I think I need help. Like, I'm not really sure what this means. I'm not really feeling like myself. And maybe I don't know where to go. Maybe that person can be the one to reach out. I've had partners reach out to me on behalf of their partner and say, like, I think she needs help, or I think he needs help. I've had doulas reach out to be like, I think my client needs some support around this. So if you just ask for help, usually there's someone who might know something to help you. PSI, which is also the organization that trained me, Postpartum Support International, also has a warm line. And so it's not a hot one, it's a warm one. So it offers support of all kinds. If you're feeling unsafe, you can call them, and there's usually like a clinically trained someone on the other line. Sometimes they're peer support specialists, so they're other parents who are maybe feeling the same way and who can kind of either commiserate or validate your feelings. Sometimes it's a case where they're a great resource for a directory as far as like connecting you with a therapist. Google, I feel like I have some mixed feelings about it. But sometimes that is a good place to at least start with, like, okay, maybe I'm looking for a therapist, or I'm trying to figure out what my symptoms indicate. And then I want to, again, then bring that to the provider or bring that to like my friend and be like, I Googled it and the symptoms say I might have a perinatal mood disorder. Like, what do I do? But take time to yourself, like take time with your partner. Sometimes it's not that I need a perinatal therapist. Sometimes I just needed to talk to someone. And so, am I communicating my needs like in a way that the person I'm telling can help me to address them? So it might mean I need therapy, or it might mean I need medication, or it might mean I just needed to talk about it and come up with a plan of like what to do next.
Right.
Like, it's not always like that the person needs like lengthy and years of therapy. Sometimes it's just I needed a space to kind of work through some stuff. And that space could just be with my partner. Like it could be with my mom, right? It could be with my sister. But definitely talk to somebody.
Yeah, I love also that you work with men, because I feel like they might actually be sort of the silent, you know, issue here, meaning that no one is really thinking it's a male problem, right? Like
Mhm.
the men are supposed to just be in control all the time, always, and they're not the ones who gave birth, but they go through, I'm sure, many of the same feelings and emotions and stress and anxiety and all that. So, you know, it's great that you also work with them, because I many times I think probably their needs get kind of swept under the carpet with everything that the woman is going through, and also now dealing with a newborn.
100%. Like when there's a perinatal mood disorder in one of the partners, the likelihood increases that there's another in the subsequent partner. So if as a mom, I also have something, my partner is likely to also develop something in response to me or just in general. Like after a pregnancy and then a baby is born, all the hormones in the room are impacted. So from the OB helping you to deliver said baby, like, or the partner who's in the room. And so his testosterone drops and some of his estrogen, excuse me, increases. And so sometimes that transition could allow a couple of like sneaky feelings to step in. And then he has this like response, like also trauma, right? Like if you've experienced your birth partner have an issue during delivery
Right.
and you were as helpless as they were in that moment, you can have secondary PTSD from what you witnessed in that
Oh,
room.
sure. Yep.
And so I love working with partners. I do love
Interesting that you brought up the hormonal thing because I didn't even know that. Like had no idea that men's testosterone dropped after pregnancy and that, but it makes sense if you think of it from a purely physiological, animalistic, I guess,
it.
perspective, right?
Hmm.
Because in the natural world, okay, you've procreated, you've
Hmm.
created another life. Now you can take a break. Not
Right.
necessarily don't necessarily need to procreate again, so testosterone drops. That's fascinating.
Yeah. And it allows for partners to bond with baby, right? Like because if you're still at that fight or flight response, like it's a little bit harder. And moms, oxytocin's all crazy, right? That love hormone is gonna create the breast milk. It's gonna like create that bond. Like dads don't have breast milk
Right.
to do, right? Like so,
Hmm.
I think that's an important point to kind of make. So like sometimes you'll see dads cry, right? Like sometimes you'll see a very strong emotion from them of like that. I like to call it like that download when like the baby's born, where it's like, okay, look, so it was really real. Like, so the baby that was on the inside is here. And now I have to like parent.
Right.
Like, and for some, that download is instant and it's like that immediate gratification of that connection. And for others, it takes a little bit. And that little bit is that space again where like those sneaky mood disorders tend to sneak in and they're like, well, I'm not doing this right. Like, and how often are we asking dad, right? A lot of the postpartum period, which is totally appropriate, is about how is mom feeling? How is she healing? Like, right, what's going on with her? Like, and sometimes partners also need a little bit of that support too around like, how are they kind of processing this period? Like, how have
Yeah.
they internalized their role? Like, their identity is shifting, their relationship is shifting. Do they understand what that means?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's all fascinating. So people can reach out to you at your website, which is www.gentlemamacounseling.com. That's GentleMamaCounseling.com, gentlemamacounseling.com. I love that name, by the
Thank
way.
you.
Awesome. And how else would you like people to get in touch with you?
They can find me on Psychology Today. They can follow me on social media, Gentle Mama Counseling on both Facebook and Instagram. I'm kind of all over the place. There was just a mother's retreat that we had last week. So we're hoping to kind of make that annual. And so they can meet me there. There's also a lot of different events kind of coming up between this month. There is a Hartford Marathon and Postpartum Sports National is having a table there. So like you can go there and get information or other PSI events around the state. There's a Climb Out of Darkness, I believe, in November, and that's for loss awareness. And so that like climb out of like that depression or that climb out of like those negative feelings after a loss can sometimes be really hard.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm kind of all over, but social media is usually the best way if you're like, okay, where is she today? Like you can find me there. I also offer support groups. I have once a month groups for moms who are pregnant, and then once a month support groups for the postpartum mom. The prenatal group is on Mondays, the second Monday of every month. And then the postpartum group is the second Thursday in the evening for every month. So they can participate there in person or virtual. But they can always
Yeah.
just shoot me an email if they have questions.
Awesome. So many good resources for sure. And they can find you in Natural Nutmeg. You can go to naturalnutmeg.com. You've written some great articles for us and you have your branding ad in there as well. So I want to thank you for all this great information. It's definitely needed. I think we've talked about a lot of things that are going to give a lot of women just more, security and opportunities to reach out to you if need be, and just, bring more awareness to this for sure.
100%. It's totally needed. And thank you so much for having me.
Of course, of course. And thank you everybody for listening. You can learn more about me at www.drdianehayden.com or at www.naturalnutmeg.com. Thanks again, Misha, and thank you all for listening. Hope everybody has a great day.